Hey everyone, it's Sarah. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about a really scary and overwhelming part of the medical school application process, and that is personal statements. I think of all the questions my students ask me, of all the things that they're really concerned about, personal statements normally comes to the top of the list because it's a really important part of the application process, and the instructions for actually writing a personal statement are pretty vague. And so first I'm going to give the few instructions that the application system actually gives for personal statements, and then I'm going to talk about my own tips and tricks for how to write a really standout personal statement. So first I'm going to talk about the actual rules and regulations for writing a personal statement. Now, these rules are the same whether you're applying to an osteopathic or allopathic medical school. If you want more information about the difference between those two types of medical schools, check out my video linked down in the description box below where I go into detail about those differences. But for now, whether you're applying to an MD or DO medical school, the rules are the same. Number one, the length of your personal statement must be 5,300 characters or less. This roughly translates to about 500 words or 1 to 1.5 pages of single-spaced normal font. And so, although you can write less than 5,300 characters if you want to, the actual applications won't let you put in more than 5,300 characters, so that's a pretty hard and fast length limit. The second thing that is required for your personal statement is that it answers the question, why do you want to go to medical school? Now, that's a pretty vague question, and there are so many ways you could answer it, but it is important that your personal statement does address and answer that question. This is unlike the Common App essay that you wrote for undergrad. Really, they just give you a blank slate to write whatever you choose. That, however, is not the case for the medical school personal statement. There is one difference to keep in mind if you're applying to osteopathic medical schools. Osteopathic medical schools have a more holistic training curriculum. They focus more on the whole body of a patient. And so it's really important if you're applying to osteopathic medical schools that you include something in your personal statement that outlines why you're interested in holistic medicine. What is it about whole body medicine that appeals to you and makes it a good training course for you? And then the final thing to know about the personal statement is that it is going to go to all of the medical schools you apply to. This is not something that you personalize medical school by medical school, and so you would certainly not want to write any names of medical schools in your personal statement or include information that would be only relevant for certain medical schools. And those are really the only 3 rules and regulations for writing a personal statement. Beyond that, you have full liberty to decide how exactly you want to go about doing it. So now I'm going to transition into talking about 9 of the best tips and tricks that I tell my students for how best to write a personal statement. Tip number 1, do this as early as possible. I can't tell you how many students have called me on the phone a week before they want to submit their application and say, Sarah, oh my goodness, I didn't even start my personal statement yet, and I feel so overwhelmed. Well, rightly so. You should feel pretty overwhelmed because the fact of the matter is writing a personal statement takes quite a while. It's really hard to first figure out what you want to say and then try to say it in a really unique and interesting way. It takes lots of brainstorming, lots of writing, and lots of editing. And so the best thing you could possibly do when writing your personal statement is give yourself adequate time to actually write it. If you guys want to know more about the medical school application timeline and different times when I suggest you accomplish different parts of the process, I have a video for that linked below. Tip number 2, write without any regard for the length. I have students who really adhere to that 5,300 character count even from the first draft. And I think that really stunts the creative process and really inhibits you from saying what you'd like to say. And so I tell my students to write as much as they want in the first few drafts. It's really easy from that point to pick and choose what are the best parts of what they've written and then cut out anything else that's not really important. Tip number 3 is be as specific as possible. Let me explain what I mean by that one. Let's say you're writing your personal statement and you think about why you want to go to medical school and you're like, it's because I love helping people. From the time I was a little kid, I've had this burning desire to help people. And so you write your whole essay about how you like to help people. But the fact of the matter is, that is not a reason why in particular you want to go to medical school. There are dozens and dozens of careers available in the world that let you help people. You could be a teacher, you could be a nurse. Heck, you could even be a postal worker and help people by delivering their mail. And so at the end of the day, that would be a pretty poor answer to the question because it doesn't really explain why exactly you want to go to medical school. Perhaps a better answer to that question could be, from the time I was little, I have loved helping people. And when I got older, my mom got really sick and was in the hospital. And so the compassion the doctor shared, coupled with the vast knowledge he had about science, really drew me to that profession where I could combine my love of helping people, my love of science, and my love of compassion. That's just an example, but hopefully the point is clear that you need to give specific reasons why exactly medicine is the best career for you. And honestly, not even medicine, but becoming a physician, because there are nurses and physician's assistants and lots of other ways you can be involved in the field of medicine. So try to give specific answers as much as possible. Tip number 4 is show instead of tell. This essay is not a space for you just to reiterate and rehash everything you're in your resume. You don't need to tell them, I led this club, I led this club, I did this research, and I got this grade in this course. They can find that information out by just looking at the rest of your application. Instead, tell stories and give examples about the skills you learned while doing those activities, instead of simply stating what you've done. Tip number 5, don't write formally. It can be really, really tempting to craft this personal statement into this polished, beautiful, formal writing piece. But the fact of the matter is, admissions officers don't want to read this polished, formal writing piece. Instead, they want something that really exemplifies who you are as an applicant. They want to be able to hear your voice and figure out your personality from the words you've written in your personal statement. And so you obviously want to adhere to grammar rules. You don't want to use curse words or inappropriate language. But what is important is that instead of sounding like a polished dictionary, that you sound like the person you really are. Write this as if you're talking to a friend or a close family member, not as if you're talking to an interviewer. And so do what you can to try to bring out your personality, your creativity, and your voice when you write your personal statement. Tip number 6, sell yourself. So many students talk about things in their personal statements that do not shine a positive light on who they are as people. Now, don't get me wrong. If you went through a tough time and you want to talk about those challenges, that is absolutely fine. As long as you then talk about how you emerged from those challenges and how they made you a stronger or better person. However, students sometimes will just write about those negative parts of their lives and just kind of end on that negative note. No admissions officer wants to interview a student who just talks about how they struggled with depression for a while and just still kind of feel really sad, or how they really struggled to do well in school and just never did any better. So it's important that if you do talk about negative topics or challenges that you faced, that you do bring some positivity and growth into that storyline so that the admissions officers can really see that you've developed and grown as a result of that challenge you faced. Tip number 7. Start your essay with an opening catch and end it with a tie-in back to that catch. And so when you're writing your essay, you want to start with something that is really going to grab the attention of the reader. You don't want to start your essay with, I want to go to medical school because, oh God, that's so boring. I don't want to read any more of that essay. Instead, start with something that really shocks the reader or intrigues the reader or makes the reader laugh. Something that's going to draw emotion out of your reader and make them want to keep reading. People say that all the time, and that's not that exciting of advice. But the second piece of that is equally important. Make sure your ending of the essay ties back into that beginning, because that's going to remind the reader of that emotion they felt in the beginning, and that's going to make your essay feel a lot more complete and cohesive. Let me give an example. When I applied to medical school, I was really interested in addiction medicine. I did a lot of research in heroin addiction and tobacco use and marijuana use back in college. And I really wanted to talk about that in my personal statement because it was so much of who I was and what I was passionate about. But instead of starting my essay with, I think addiction medicine is really important and I spent a lot of time doing it, that's a terrible beginning. Instead, my first line of my personal statement was, I am addicted to drugs. The reader at that point is like, what? What is this person admitting? What is this essay going to be about? Obviously, I'm not addicted to drugs, and later on throughout the essay, I explained that my addiction wasn't actually to the drug, but to working with the field of addiction medicine. But that opening line really grabbed the reader's attention and made them want to keep reading. And then when I finished my essay, I re-referenced that addiction to drugs in a slightly different way, which tied back into the beginning of my essay and made everything feel very complete and cohesive. Tip number 8, have people read over your personal statement. And specifically, I recommend having at least 3 different types of people read over your personal statement. Number 1, a close friend or family member. Essentially, someone who knows you really well and knows what your voice is. Ask them when they read it to think about whether or not your voice is coming out in your writing. Can they sense your personality? Does it feel like something that's a great reflection of who you are as a person? The second person I recommend having read through your personal statement is someone who's familiar with the medical school application process. This could be a medical school consultant. This could be an advisor in your college who helps you with medical school admissions. This could even be a doctor who's gone through the medical school process themselves. Essentially just someone who knows what medical schools are looking for in these essays to make sure that you're hitting the things that are important. And third, I recommend you have someone read over your essay for copy editing purposes. This is making sure that your punctuation is correct, that verb tenses are correct, that your sentences are structured properly. Because even if you have amazing content, great ideas, and then presenting it in a really informal and interesting way, if you have a lot of grammatical errors throughout your essay, it's going to leave a bad taste in the reader's mouth. And my last and final tip is write an essay that could only be written by you. This is what I mean by that. Let's pretend you wrote an essay, your personal statement, and you have 9 other personal statements from 9 other applicants to the medical school you're applying to. A parent or a friend should be able to look at those 10 essays and easily pinpoint which one was written by you. That means that that essay would have to have your personality, stories that are only true to you, and your voice throughout the essay in order for that person to know it was really yours. I can't tell you how many personal statements I read that could have been written by just about any medical school applicant. They talk about all the cliches like, I just want to help the people around me. I love science. In college, I did shadowing for physicians, and then I did some research on cancer biology, right? Maybe you've done those things, but also a lot of other people have done those things too. So do your absolute best to write an essay that could only be yours, that only has your voice, only has your little anecdotes or stories, and has your feelings and thoughts and emotions very clearly written throughout. So I hope those 9 tips were helpful. I hope that when you sit down, hopefully not too late in the process, and start writing your personal statement, start brainstorming ideas, trying to figure out how best to answer that question of why do you want to go to medical school? I hope you can consider the 9 tips I just talked about. You can really think over them and try to apply as many as possible when actually going through the writing process. Because I guarantee you, if you listen to these tips, if you put the time in and make sure your personality shines from your personal statement, it's going to be a really, really helpful addition to your medical school application. And so if you guys have any questions about the things I just talked about in this video, please either comment below or send me an email. My email is in the description box below. Please like this video if you learned anything at all from what I said, and please subscribe to my channel so you can stay up to date on more college and medical school application tips that I post. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.